Hello again. We're back and we have more questions and more answers. Thousands and thousands of people have been emailing and writing, et cetera, and there are lots and lots of questions, and they are on this computer. One of the first questions is, who is Schumer and what is he talking about? Well, Schumer is a senator, and he's the top ranking Democrat in the Senate. As a matter of fact, he's the head of the minority in the Senate, and he was talking about the Hillary campaign recently, and he really surprised, I think, a lot of people. He sure surprised me. So the question is, what did he say? And he was talking about the Hillary campaign, and instead of snuggling up to the Clintons, he really blasted the campaign and by implication blasted her. He asked a question. Well, he didn't ask a question, he made a statement. Namely, when you lose to somebody who has 40% popularity, and that would be Donald Trump, when you lose to such a loser, in other words, you don't blame other things like Russia or the FBI director. You blame yourself. How interesting. A top-ranking Democrat finally addressing Hillary and the Hillary question. Namely, what did we do wrong? That's Schumer's question. And his answer was very, very interesting, actually. It was that people don't know or didn't know during the campaign what the Democrats stood for, what they were all about. All they knew was that the Democrats said, we're against Trump. That's not enough to win an election. Hillary was only saying, in other words, I'm not Donald Trump. But here's an exciting figure. If you like Trump, she said, if you like Trump, the chances are 50-50 that you are deplorable. How's that? That's 1/4 of the American electorate. She said, you are deplorable. This is not going to win an election. All right, Schumer goes on, and actually the New York Times goes on to point out that in the last election, almost half of the voters said that one thing was the most important thing, and that is, namely, change. Now that's pretty vague, but people do vote for sheer change. Well, about 80% of the voters who said change is number one in my book, 80% of the people who went to the polls just to change things voted for Trump. As a matter of fact, more than 80%. So Hillary, who had all these elaborate ideas, and a lot of them were wonderful ideas, very solid Democratic core values were included, she did a terrible job of articulating these things and basically said that she was against Donald Trump, basically. Well, let's move on to other issues that Mr. Schumer addressed. Again, he's the top Democrat in the Senate. This guy has a lot of power. And he was talking about a new plan, and for once, I can sit here and say the Democrats are doing something right. He said there's going to be a 3-point program coming up. Number one thing is going to be a big infrastructure program, a $1 trillion program. I don't know how much $1 trillion is. I guess it's 1,000 billions. That's an awful lot of money. Finally, in other words, if we dedicate this money correctly, we may get an airport in America, an international airport that looks like it was not built in 1742. Go anywhere else in the modern world, and you'll see magnificent airports, great bridges, roads without potholes, whereas in America we specialize, as you know, in inserting potholes into the surface of the roads. In other countries, they do it differently. And we may catch up with this. And number two in the Democratic plan, the Schumer plan, is a $15 minimum wage. Well, remember Bernie Sanders? Bernie, the whole time he talked last year, said, you know what we need? A $15 minimum wage. And that, among other things, got him in deep trouble with whom? Obviously Republicans, but even with Democrats. And it's nice to see that the top Democrat in the Senate, at least, is now saying, Bernie, you did something right. All right, number three in the Schumer plan is lower drug costs. Boy, is that ever good. Now, we can take a look at some of this stuff in more detail. Schumer says that there will be, if the Democrats succeed in this, rules that demand drug companies justify any price increases. There will be rules that say you must justify a new price a higher price. You must justify it to the public. Now that's a little bit sneaky. Justify it to the public. What in the world does that mean? What it really ought to be is the Democrats should force the pharmaceutical companies to justify planned price increases to the government, like to the, I don't know, some drug commission in Washington. And the drug commission should say, the agency ought to say, no, there's no need for that. At least that's what they ought to say most of the time. If Schumer only wants to force the drug companies to justify a price increase to the public, we don't have any power. They should have to justify it, in other words, to the government when it's a plan, when it's not actually a reality. Number two, in the Schumer and Democratic plan, well, they want to empower Medicare to negotiate lower drug prices. Now that's really important. Medicare at the moment doesn't have the power, the legal power, the governmental power, to talk to drug companies and tell them, we'll pay $1 instead of $100 for that drug. We're not going to take part in your plan to cheat consumers and patients. At the moment, in other words, Medicare, which covers millions and millions and millions of people, and if you're under 65, someday it will cover you too, so this is important to everybody. Medicare, says Schumer, ought to have the power to tell the drug companies what Medicare will pay for a drug instead of the current system where the drug companies tell Medicare what Medicare will pay. I mean, that's a pretty sick situation. Number three, according to Schumer, this is outside of drug companies, Schumer says we're going to break up big companies that are hurting consumers just because they're so big, and we're going to stop mergers that cut competition, like in airlines and in cable. Now that'll go over really well with everybody, and also in the drug companies. So number three, the Schumer plan will break up big corporations. And again, where have the Democrats been? Teddy Roosevelt did that more than 100 years ago. Teddy Roosevelt, like his cousin Frank, a great Democrat, of course. Wrong. Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican. So this plan is now catching up with a plan that was put into effect part way 100 years ago, not by a Democrat, but by a Republican. Good to see the Democrats finally catching up. All right, what about number four in the Schumer plan? Well, it's assistance to small businesses to train workers for unfilled jobs. This is wonderful. This is really great. In Germany, for decades and decades and decades, if you were a high school student and you just weren't into school and didn't want to go to college, it just wasn't your thing, but you loved engines, well, for decades now, if you're in that situation in Germany, you stop going to school, basically. You go to school a couple days a week. The other 3 days of the week, you're trained by a hyper-modern corporation in engine repair or whatever it is that you like. And then you really, really learn that, and guess what? You get paid. You get paid. You're a high school kid and you're getting paid to learn something, and you also have to go to school a couple days a week to make sure you know the difference between Republicans and Democrats and learn a few other facts like that. So in other words, you get a big group of people out of a plan like that in Germany who know what they're doing when they lift the hood, and they also understand that it's not just their job that's important, but the culture as well. Well, let's go into something else. Let's shift gears entirely here. We've been talking a lot about drugs and healthcare in America. What about the same thing in Germany? I have some details about it. This is from the Wall Street Journal, you might say, of Germany. And there are a few facts that I'd just like to throw out that answer a few questions. Namely, what's so great about healthcare outside of America, and why is it important? Well, in Germany, for instance, they have a system of non-governmental, non-profit health insurance companies. Amazing health insurance companies that don't make any money. That's not their purpose. It's wonderful. All right. Why is that wonderful? Because this whole debate actually touches on what you might call, and what this newspaper calls, a society's core values, and that's the whole answer. So what are the core values that are involved in the health insurance problem? The core values basically come down to personal freedom and responsibility and the free market. Americans love that stuff. We absolutely love that stuff. Personal freedom, individual responsibility, and a free market. And it's a great system that helps to produce in some ways, but healthcare is a mess because of it. And what the Germans do is they keep those values, personal freedom and all of that, and they add one more that goes to the core of a society's values. And what is that? Solidarity. Cooperation between citizens. Cooperation and solidarity between corporations and citizens, et cetera, et cetera. Solidarity. That is at the core of the German system. It's not at the core of ours. Here, basically, the core of our system with regard to healthcare has always been, if you get sick, good luck. Buy some health insurance, it'll cover some of the cost, good luck. Don't ask anybody else to pay for it. Whereas in Germany, the whole idea is on solidarity, as one insurer, which is named AOK, believe it or not, one health insurance company says, here's what we mean by solidarity. The wealthier pay for the less well-off citizens. The wealthier pay for the treatment of the less well-off citizens. The younger pay for the older. The younger pay for the older. Single people pay for families, and in very many cases, men pay for special care that women need. So that's what solidarity means in Germany. The wealthy pay for the less well-off, the young for the old, singles for families, and often men for women. Nobody complains about that. How many people in Germany are left out of the system? 0.1%. That's right, 0.1%. Everybody's in it. There's no malarkey about a mandate and you can get out of the mandate by paying a little bit of a fine like you can over here. No, everybody is in the system. The system, by the way, has two parts. It all started about 150 years ago under a guy, a leader, a chancellor named Bismarck, who thought, well, I'm no socialist, but there are a lot of people out there, workers, who are getting bad treatment. They get sick, they can't pay for treatment. Let's have a mandatory health insurance system. 1883, he did that, 1883. So America now, if we get a good system, we'll be hurtling into the 19th century. I guess it's progress. Well, anyway, what is the purpose of that health insurance system that Bismarck invented? Well, he invented it partly. He was no socialist. He invented that partly to avert class warfare and to maintain social stability. That's not bad. That could help overcome one of America's great problems right now. All these disparate views and clamoring voices and too many cable news shows. What we need to do is to adopt a system of health care, besides other things, that maintains or restores solidarity and social stability and avoids bad class antagonisms. All right, now the whole point is, somebody's going to ask you, yes, but that sounds great, but can Germans choose their doctors, their hospitals, and so forth under this system? Absolutely, they can choose their family doctor, their primary care physician. They can choose their specialist. They don't even have to go to a family doctor or a primary care doctor to get some sort of referral. They just go to the specialist. Very simple, very clear. You can also choose your hospital. So there's no conflict there between solidarity and personal freedom. Everybody is in the program, that's the solidarity part, but the program allows you virtually full free choice. In fact, I don't know of any unfree parts of it. Well, the German system, as I said, is not state-run, and people will ask, well, then who does run this thing? It's supervised by the government. That's a good thing. It's regulated, but there are 100 insurance companies in Germany in the healthcare system. 100. You ought to be able to find somebody whom you like, and you can. And as a result, you find a company that will take care of you. All you do is show your ID card, your healthcare ID card, to the receptionist at the office, the doctor's office. You pay no money in normal cases. Almost never do you pay any money to the doctor. And he sees you or she sees you, and that's the end of it. You don't even get a bill in the mail. It's incredible. Well, is there anything else that's good about this? Probably there are. And then the ultimate question is, wait a minute, what does this cost? It actually doesn't cost a person very much. About 8% of their paycheck. 8% of your paycheck goes into this system. The employer pays another 8%, and then the government adds some tax dollars to that. So there's a lot of money floating around there. And you pay actually 7.3%. It's not even 8%. 7.3% of your paycheck. Well, what about co-payments? Somebody's going to ask, besides those premium costs, what about co-payments? In America, we have huge co-payments. If you got Medicare, you have to pay 20% of the bill yourself. That's your co-payment, at least. And then there's your deductible and stuff like that. In Germany, that carnival does not exist. And co-payments in Germany, well, they do exist. Here they are. You do have to pay about $12, 10 euros, about $12 for your outpatient care. Yes, every 3 months, you've got to cough up $12. Imagine. Well, what about for prescription drugs? I have to admit, you do have to pay a copay for those. It's between $7 and $12 or $13 for each drug. And if you can't pay it, the government will help you. And I'm not sure, by the way, that you have to pay for each drug. I think it's per prescription, and a prescription can have a number of drugs in that one prescription. Well, what about for hospital stays? Isn't there a co-payment for that, just like in America? No. Well, there is, $12 a day. All right, one last point. Do you have to be a part of this great government or quasi-government, let's say public? Do you have to be a part of this public system in Germany? No. If you make about $65,000 a year or more, you can buy private insurance and you get faster service from doctors and hospitals. And that's a disadvantage. That I find rather unclear. I can't see why a system that prides itself on solidarity allows private insurance that gets you faster service. This Wall Street Journal newspaper of Germany admits that a lot of people in Germany have to wait weeks before they see somebody, at least a specialist, or before they get an operation or something, compared to a privately insured person. Well, that is a bad thing, and I'm sure the Germans are working on it. Actually, I know they are working on that. And the rest of it, what a system. It's not governmental. I referred a moment ago to a government insurance company. I should have said government regulated insurance company, and the whole thing looks pretty beautiful. So let's hope now that Schumer and the Democrats cast Hillary aside and say, not only do we oppose Donald Trump, we're also in favor of somebody, namely you.